Most relationships in our world are built on the principle of submission. Even if people are in equal positions, they still try to follow the norms and rules that are acceptable to their partner, expecting them to do the same in return. But why are people inclined to fulfill requests and follow rules? What kinds of power exist, and why does an excess of power change people? Let's discuss this in the video if you're into it. If you dig our psychology videos, subscribe to the channel and spread the word to your friends. There's no clear-cut understanding in psychology of what submission really is. This allows some authors to view it as obedience, often linking it to personality traits. Based on this, researchers identify types of submission like compliance, outward, and internal conformity, suggestibility, and adopting social norms and ideals as one's own. However, this approach doesn't look at submission as a distinct kind of relationship to rules and norms used for self-discipline and self-regulation. But from this angle, submission plays a huge role in every person's life, starting from childhood. Having clear and reasonable rules serves as a guarantee of stability for a child's psyche. It means safety, whereas total freedom, especially in critical situations, becomes a source of extreme stress for a child who's not yet able to rely on their own views and decisions. As we grow up, each of us takes on many new social roles, each with its own unspoken rules of conduct. For instance, our first social role outside the family is that of a student at school, which requires the ability to listen to the teacher, follow the schedule, and complete assignments. In line with the goals set, adhering to these rules contributes to the child's success as a student and reinforces their self-esteem. Further down the line, a person collects a whole set of such social roles: friend, member of a sports team, romantic partner, employee, candidate for a new job, and so on. Each time we encounter a new life situation, we step into it with a certain social role, and our success depends on how well we play that role. The experiments of psychologist Stanley Milgram show that by following the rules prescribed by social roles, most people are ready to perform even actions that contradict their values. Some social roles involve not submission, but managing others. Interestingly, different people relate to these roles in polar opposite ways at times. Some absolutely cannot handle the role of a leader and strive to avoid any kind of power, most often due to a fear of responsibility and dealing with contradictions. However, there are also those who aren't at all intimidated by power and are even attracted to it. And sometimes the pursuit of power becomes critical and manic. Let's figure out why this happens. In her works, the psychoanalyst Karen Horney divided the drive for power into normative and neurotic. The normative drive is usually driven by noble motives: to improve work processes, make qualitative changes, and tackle ambitious tasks. But the neurotic drive often stems from attempts to compensate for feelings of inferiority due to physical flaws, self-hatred, anxiety, and illnesses. According to Alfred Adler's theory, some people strive to compensate for feelings of inferiority through sexuality. However, Adler also highlighted power as a way to compensate for and reinforce one's sense of self-worth. The sense of being a complete person is formed as early as adolescence. During this period, each person goes through the complex process of separating and asserting their emotional independence from their parents, which often manifests as emotional and behavioral rebellion. If this process is disrupted and the adolescent's rebellion is suppressed through an authoritarian parenting style, that deep-seated feeling of inferiority emerges. If that separating process gets disrupted and the adolescent rebellion is shut down with an authoritarian parenting style, that deep-seated feeling of inferiority emerges. Much later, the pent-up inner rebellion and drive for self-assertion burst out in completely unpredictable, sometimes even pathological forms of obsessive domination over others. Sometimes, that neurotic craving for power stems from a deep-seated fear of loneliness, as Erich Fromm wrote about in his theory of power. He believed this fear motivates people to become leaders and orators, and that the desire to possess others' attention conceals a sadistic motive. Such people turn others into mere functions, force them to serve their interests, and wield control, one of the most powerful forms of manipulation in human interaction. We may not notice it, but human communication is made up of manipulations, manifesting at all kinds of levels, from casual chats with acquaintances to the values imposed on us. The concepts of power, influence, and authority are often conflated in everyday life. However, social and organizational psychology draws strict distinctions between them. Let's start by defining power. It's the collection of resources that allow some people to influence others' behavior. Having power implies that one person or group has the ability to force, coerce, or sway others to think or act in certain ways. Influence refers to the relationships between people that allow one person a degree of likelihood to make another change their behavior as desired. To effectively influence others' behavior, you need to operate from a position of power. Authority is the right to use power to govern the behavior of other individuals or groups. But what gives someone authority? Three main types are identified. The first is resource power. If one person possesses far more of the resources another needs, their influence carries much more weight. These resources could be money, equipment, any material valuables. The second is position power, also called formal authority. Beyond the official sanction to manage others that underlies position power, it encompasses rules of interaction prescribed by social roles, and often the authority of a position extends beyond formal relationships. The third is personal power. Many leaders known throughout history possessed personal qualities deemed admirable by others. In this case, a person can compel those who recognize their outstanding qualities to act according to their mindset and views. The fourth is expert power. It's far easier for someone to become an effective leader if they're seen as a widely recognized expert in a particular field. This strict delineation of different power sources only really applies in theory. In actual management practice, power almost never stems from just one source. They're usually all present to varying degrees. Almost everyone has encountered examples seeming to confirm the notion that power corrupts. And indeed, research has borne out power's influence on personal psychology. First, those in power start treating common norms with disregard. For example, Adam Galinsky found that powerful participants in an experiment were far more likely to turn off an annoying fan than ordinary ones. While most people struggle to breach internal prohibitions like cheating even when tempted, those who feel powerful and privileged more easily violate such prohibitions and act as suits their interests. Second, power amplifies egocentrism, putting one's own needs above others. People earning under $25,000 annually donate around 4.2% of their income to charity on average, while those making over $150,000 give just 2.7%. Recently at Columbia University, psychologists conducted an interesting experiment dividing participants into subordinate and boss roles. Recently at Columbia University, psychologists conducted an interesting experiment dividing participants into subordinate and boss roles. This was one trial in a series. Before starting the game, they asked each participant to put together a bundle of candies and purchase it either for themselves or another participant of their choosing. And here's what happened. The bosses bought way more candies for themselves than for the other person, whereas those stuck in the subordinate role in this game bought more for others than for themselves. These results suggest that someone vested with power ascribes greater importance to themselves than to others. Of course, we have to keep in mind that all research results and experiments get averaged out, and claiming power can corrupt absolutely anyone would be wrong. Power does unleash and amplify egocentrism, but the ways this manifests hugely depend on the individual's personal qualities, level of empathy, and ability to take the long view. So what do you think? Is power bound to warp someone, or can it be avoided? How can you tell if you're under the sway of others' opinions or ideals foisted upon you? Look, human beings are hardwired to crave power and status. It's an evolutionary hangover from our primate ancestors, where the alpha male called all the shots. Nowadays, that impulse gets channeled into more civilized pursuits like career ambition, sports, or activism. But left unchecked, the hunger for dominance can definitely bring out the worst in people. I'm reminded of that classic psychology experiment at Stanford where they turned a bunch of students into mock prisoners and guards. Within days, the guards were acting like straight-up bullies, humiliating and abusing the prisoners just because they could. That's an extreme example, but it shows how intoxicating power can be if you lack self-awareness. The antidote is to nurture your empathy muscles and remember we're all human, flawed but deserving of dignity. The greatest leaders don't lord power over others. They inspire and elevate those around them. They know real strength lies in bringing people together, not lording it over them. At the end of the day, each of us has to scrutinize our own motives and egos. Are we genuinely trying to help others and make the world better? Or are we chasing status and authority for its own sake? It's a hard question, but answering it honestly is how we avoid turning into power-hungry jerks. So yeah, power can warp perspectives if we're not careful, but it can also be a force for good if wielded with wisdom and compassion. Just don't let it go to your head, you dig? Stay humble, stay thoughtful, and use whatever clout you've got to lift up others rather than yourself. That's the path to being a true leader worth following.